Gasconia, and today I will be sharing with you what I think are the best campaigns to play if you're new to Total War Warhammer 3. As, let's be real, CA did a really poor job at recommending Karl Franz. Now, I know most people won't buy all the content for the game series, but I'm gonna assume you will at the very least have the base 3 games, as I think these are essential. This is also a recommendation for campaigns to play on the Immortal Empires campaign map, as I would advise you avoid playing the Realms of Chaos, since it is a lot more complicated and, in my opinion, a lot less enjoyable. I will be choosing these campaigns not just based on how difficult they are, but also how much you can learn by playing them. So things like how to use your units, how to interact with the campaign map, how to play with and without special mechanics, and so on. Just before we begin though, I should mention on which difficulties I think you should be playing the game, as there is a bit of nuance to them. The campaign difficulty as a beginner should either be normal or easy, not really too illogical, but when it comes to battle difficulties, which is supposed to represent the competency of the AI on the battlefield, I would advise that you play on very hard battle difficulty. This is mostly because the difference between battle difficulties is almost negligible. The AI on normal difficulty is gonna be as competent as the AI on a very hard battle difficulty. The only difference between choosing battle difficulties are gonna be auto-resolve cheats. And what do I mean by this? Well, on the campaign map, when you engage a battle, you will have the option of auto-resolving it, which basically means that you will have the AI play out the battle and give you a likely outcome based on the composition of your and your opponent's armies. However, battle difficulty will also determine how big of an advantage you as the player will receive in auto-resolve. So if you are playing on very hard battle difficulty, you as the player will receive no cheats whatsoever, which means that your units in auto-resolve will be valued as they should be. On lower battle difficulties, however, you as the player will get a lot of cheats. So much so that if you play on normal battle difficulty, you will be able to auto-resolve almost any enemy army you come across. This is because the game will basically multiply the amount of units you have by a certain amount. So instead of having, say, 1 unit of Grail Knights, auto-resolve on normal battle difficulty will say that you have 5 units of Grail Knights. The lower battle difficulties are basically just a skip battles button for when you're lazy and don't really want to fight them, or you just want to play a campaign completely devoid of them. However, I would advise that you get familiar with fighting battles, as in my opinion, that is where the real fun of this game lies. And if you're not confident in yourself winning battles, you can always lower the AI stat slider to the lowest setting and reduce the AI stats on the battlefield itself, which will heavily influence the outcome of battles in your favor. So playing on very hard battle difficulty with lowered AI stats will force you to fight battles manually, but also make it so you have an easier time when fighting them. And now, the first campaign I would recommend you play will be Thorgrim Grudgebearer. The dwarves are, in my opinion, a relatively easy race to play, with easy to use armies and not so difficult to understand mechanics. The Age of Reckoning, a mechanic that tasks you to settle grudges by winning battles, can be a bit difficult to use for somebody that isn't aggressive. But if you don't expand, this shouldn't really be a big problem for you. This is a mechanic that will also encourage you to actually try and go out onto the map and not just sit in your settlements waiting for something to happen. The dwarves also have a more interesting and engaging settlement building, so you can tinker around and see which buildings you can create, which ones will help you out, and which ones will be detrimental for you. So whether you decide to play tall, as in just sitting on a few settlements, or wide, going out and conquering the map, the dwarves are competent and enjoyable in both of these playstyles. Dwarf armies are also extremely easy and satisfying to use, with melee units that will hold the line indefinitely, and range units that will annihilate the enemy. They also have quite a few interesting war machines and artillery pieces, with gyrocopters and bombers capable of bringing death and destruction onto the battlefield, or organ guns just mowing down tides of gobos. This campaign should also help you to understand how range units and artillery pieces work, and how you can properly use them to win battles. As to why I chose Thorgrim specifically, well, he provides you with some really useful but also passive bonuses to your campaign, which makes him a lot easier to manage. He also plays like a regular faction, being able to normally confederate the other dwarf lords, and not just through collecting grudges, which I believe will make confederations easier for beginners. He also starts fighting relatively easy opponents with the greenskins close to you, but is surrounded by tougher opponents later on, meaning that you won't have to wait long for a proper fight. The province you start in is also relatively easy to defend, with only 2 entrances leading into it, and all of the settlements being relatively close to one another. So overall, a campaign that I think will be easy to start, in a relatively easy to defend area, with a beginner-friendly race and faction. The next campaign I would advise you play will be Tyrion. While the High Elves aren't an extremely easy race to play, Tyrion starts in the homeland of the Elves, and as such, he is relatively safe from enemy incursions, which will basically mean you will be left alone for the majority of your campaign. Your starting enemies aren't anything that is gonna be too difficult to deal with, and the filthy pirates that come to raid you can also be dealt with later on. Now, unlike the dwarves, the High Elves are less technologically advanced, with their most sophisticated war machines being chariots. They are, however, well versed in casting magic, have the absolute best archer units in the game, and have a lot of interesting war beasts you can make use of, such as lions, dragons, and phoenixes. With the High Elves, the focus shifts from having a sturdy front line that will stop any enemy, to filling your opponents full of arrows, burning them to crisps with bolts of lightning, and dropping the occasional bird poop on them. So with the High Elves, you will basically learn how to use magic, range heavy armies, and war beasts properly. With Tyrion, you will be safe enough to take your time in building up your territory, and then experiment by building different kinds of armies, or engaging in diplomacy. The next campaign I would recommend you play will be Zhao Ming. Now, I probably could have made this one as the first campaign you should play, since it is an actual Warhammer 3 campaign, but I feel like he would be more difficult to play than the previous 2 factions. Zhao Ming has a fairly easy start to his campaign, but he does have a relatively difficult enemy to fight, the Skaven, which you will always want to be cautious of because of their ambush attack. Cathay has a decently strong economy and relatively strong units, but unlike the previous 2 factions, Cathay's way of waging war is to drown the enemy in tides of peasants. The more armies you can field without going bankrupt, the better your campaign will go. Your units also have a mechanic they benefit from, where if you keep different unit types, yin and yang units, close to one another, they will receive some decent stat bonuses, which will introduce more nuance to your battles. Your settlement building is also a bit more intricate as well, again with your yin and yang harmony, which you will always want to keep in balance. Zhao Ming, like the previous 2 lords, is in a relatively safe location, surrounded by weak starting enemies and reliable allies. This means that you can take your time to interact with the factions around you and figure out where you want to expand. You will, however, meet the Deathmaster himself later on, and he alone will keep you from getting bored in this campaign. Ultimately, I think Cathay is there for if you want to learn how to use lots of armies, with lots of units on the battlefield, and to get a better understanding on how you can build up your settlements. Then the next campaign I would recommend will be Gor-Rok. The lizards are a fairly easy race to figure out, they have next to no complexity in their campaigns, and their armies are fairly easy to use. They unfortunately have really poor optimization when it comes to their empire building, as you basically have to build every single one of their settlements to progress your campaign, and this can make them extremely frustrating to play. But they do make up for it when it comes to fighting battles, as they have some of the strongest and easiest armies to use on the battlefield, with big giant dinos, lots of strong melee infantry, and extremely powerful spellcasters. Gor-Rok is the easiest lizard lord to play, as he himself is a really strong melee combatant that starts the campaign with Lord Croak, who is a ridiculously powerful spellcaster that can make most of your enemies disappear in an explosive way. You also start the campaign with a fairly defendable, high-income settlement that, in combination with your campaign bonuses, will make it so you won't have to worry about ever losing it to enemy attacks. However, his campaign will not be without challenge, as you will be surrounded by strong opponents that will give you a hard time if you aren't careful. And since the lizards have a rather poor economy, you will be able to field only a few armies, which you will have to learn how to make a really good use of if you want to progress your campaign. Ultimately, I think this is a campaign that will help you learn how to play with fewer melee-focused armies, as well as teach you how to play around with more war beasts and spellcasting. Finally, the last faction I would recommend you start playing as will be Be'lakor. Be'lakor, like Tyrion, is extremely safe from enemy attacks. Located on an isolated island in between 3 continents. You start off fighting against a relatively easy opponent, and afterwards you are basically free to do whatever you want. You have a unique mechanic which allows you to create portals anywhere on the map, which you can use to instantly teleport between. This makes it so you can go adventuring and exploring the map without ever feeling threatened, or it feeling tedious. As the Warriors of Chaos, you will have access to a very diverse-ish roster of extremely powerful melee units, which are relatively easy but also satisfying to use. Your recruitment is also separate from your settlements, meaning that you will never have to stop to recruit your units, making it all the easier to just keep on moving and exploring the map. This way of recruiting units will also force you to win battles with whichever units you are able to find along the way. The Warriors of Chaos economy is also different from that of the previous races, where you will have to make income by fighting battles rather than just building up your settlements. Overall, with the Warriors of Chaos, it is less about learning how to manage an empire, and more about how to traverse the world, fight battles, manage resources, and figure out which bonuses are best for your campaign. Out of all the Warriors of Chaos, Be'lakor provides the best experience for this, as you're basically never threatened in his campaign and have the tools to do exactly what you want. Well, these are the campaigns I would recommend you start playing as a beginner, as you will have a relatively easy time with them, but not so easy that you will get bored of them quickly. If you guys enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe for future content. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne fights as one.